Very good afternoon to all of you, and thank you very much for taking the time to come and join us for today's forum. My name is James Chen. Today's forum deals with a very important topic in Malaysia, and that is the relationship between East and West Malaysia and the state of the Malaysian Federation after half a century. I'm very pleased that we have two very eminent speakers who are very qualified to speak on this issue. Both of them represent the majority group in Sabah and Sarawak, the Ibans and the Kadazan Dusuns. From Sarawak, we have Tan Sri James Masin, a senior minister in the Sarawak State Government, and President of Parti Rakyat Sarawak. Tan Sri James is not only the most senior Iban leader, but what is not widely known is that he is also a scholar as well. Tan Sri James actually holds a PhD from the Australian National University in the field of anthropology. And I remember reading his thesis because his thesis has one of those unforgettable titles. And the title of his thesis is The Coming of the Gods. It's a pioneering study of the Timman Gawai Aman of the Balai region in northern Sarawak. Our second speaker is YB Darell Leiking, a PKR Member of Parliament and a practicing lawyer from Sabah. YB Darell is the most prominent young political leader among the Kadazan Dusun community in Sabah today. He represents the district of Penampang, and for those of you who know Sabah well, Penampang is the heartland of Kadazan Dusun politics. The moderator this afternoon is Professor Andrew Hardin from the Center for Asian Legal Studies, National University of Singapore. Professor Hardin is a well-known name in the legal fraternity, not only in the region, and he has written extensively on the constitutional developments in Malaysia. So thank you again for coming, and Andrew, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much for coming on what is a very sad day here in Malaysia, a day of mourning, but it's also a day of national solidarity. So in a way, it's appropriate to think about 50 years of Malaysia on a day such as this, and we're delighted to have our two visitors, one from Sabah, one from Sarawak. Tan Sri James says that I'm put in the middle in case they disagree with each other, but we'll wait and see whether that happens. This project really started with the observation that in September 2013 there was very little in the way of celebration of 50 years of the creation of Malaysia in 1963. Even now, looking forward to the 57th anniversary of Merdeka, this is hinged to Malaysia, so it's the 57th anniversary of Malaysia. So we noticed that not very much celebration was taking place either in West Malaysia or in Sabah or Sarawak, and this is kind of a puzzling situation to start with. James reports in his chapter the interesting fact that in Sarawak they actually reenacted the independence celebrations for Sarawak, which not many people know about, but this happened a few days before Sarawak joined the Federation in September 1963. So somebody in Sarawak was trying to make an important point about the autonomy of Sarawak. So we thought it was an opportune moment to look back over 50 years of experience of the federal system in Malaysia with, and we make no apologies for this, an extensive emphasis on Sabah and Sarawak. There's also a chapter about Singapore in the book, because obviously Malaysia at that point was created out of the Federation of Malaya. Sabah, or Northern Borneo, North Borneo as it was called at the time, and Sarawak, and also Singapore. Singapore, of course, left the Federation 2 years later, and Kevin Tan in his chapter has talked about that aspect. So we have here in Malaysia a very complex form of federalism, because the Federation of Malaya was already a federation before it federated with these three other entities. And I know there are people who would point out that Negri Sembilan is also a federation. So you have a sort of a wedding cake of 3 layers of federalism in this complex system. But the point is, we wanted to get people from different perspectives, different disciplines together to look back over 50 years and see how federalism has been. But this is not purely a historical survey, because you will find that the chapters in this book are largely very critical of the federalism that has been practiced in this country over the last 50 years. There are lots of implications in terms of how things are now and how they probably should be for the future. So it's not simply a kind of historical record that is retrospective, it's also prospective, it's looking forwards to the future. So we offered this book to you. It's actually literally offered at 40 ringgit for today only, so I hope many of you will go away with a copy and let us know what you think about some of the very controversial issues that have been raised. Now, what is, I think, very interesting about this is that the contributors to the book, while they have been very critical about federal issues ranging from legal and constitutional issues to political issues to economic and even social and religious issues, nonetheless, none of the contributors in this book has actually advocated secession for Sabah or Sarawak. So at some level, in spite of all their criticisms, they think that there is something to celebrate after 50 years, and there is something that should be maintained beyond the 50 years. But what is very clear is that although they are not dissatisfied with the notion of federalism as such, they are dissatisfied with the form that federalism has taken during this 50-year period. So this is a book that will be unpopular in some quarters because it is quite fiercely critical, and if you look at the two very interesting interviews that Bridget Welsh conducted with Tan Sri Simon Sipam and Datuk Peter Mooney, you'll find some very good oral history, because these are people who are actually around and involved in events in 1963. So I think this is a tremendously important record that we have in this book, and they don't pull any punches, as is often the case with elderly people being interviewed. They have nothing to lose, and so they haven't pulled their punches in terms of what happened in 1963, and also the issues that have unfolded during the last 50 years. So we indulged in the joke at the seminar that some of you may get, that the Federation was cobbled together by the cobbled commission in 1963, and many people have a problem with the way in which this happened. But you know, we are where we are now, and so there are serious issues for the present and to be considered for the future that we have raised and presented in this book, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say about some of these issues. I realize you won't have read the book at this point, but no doubt you have positions, and of course our noted speakers. So having hopefully introduced the book adequately, or really briefly in that way, hope you find it of interest. We'll now move on to our speakers, and starting with Tan Sri James Massey. Thank you so much, James, for coming on.
For inviting me for this very interesting, nevertheless, I think it's very important discussion that we need to know. I haven't read the book, so what I'm going to say is basically what I feel and what I know. Now, I've been in the Ivory Tower for so long. I finished with A&E for 1982, and all these years I have not been back to the university. So I'm not very familiar with the format, with the thinking ability of the people who are in the university. So please treat me first as a politician, and do forgive me if I make mistakes along that line. The second thing, YB Darell Leiking is not. When I came in, I told the professor that please sit in the middle. It's not because we're from different party organization, that's my point. No. The problem is because both he is from Sabah and I'm from Sarawak, and we've been keep a distance for quite a while. So just in case, as we are going to learn of each other's nuances in politics as well as social behavior, it is said that a neutral person sits between us. So by and by we will learn to know each other. But I do know of YB when he was a young man. So, all right, I've been asked to say a few words on 50 years of Malaysia, Federalism Revisited. When you talk about Federalism Revisited, it's a journey back into history. The events encountered when researching back history with the federalism is involved. It could either be a mundane journey back, what you discover could be explosive. As we are walking back to family closet, which is full of non-family artifacts, are we opening a Pandora box full of surprises and a lot of unkept promises? The Federation of Malaysia was formed, I'm sure you will find it out later, with the legal documentation and fixed understanding among its members. It was based on this firm understanding and agreement that Malaysia was conceived, and any breach of that understanding could result to breakdown. Recently, I had lunch with a legal friend of mine who recently said to me, in federation, it's either all or none. Therefore, all members of the federation are responsible and are accountable to keep that agreement intact. In my short observation of my journey back to history of federalism, I shall focus on only one issue, and that is when is Malaysia independent day? On 9th of July 1963, Malaysian agreement was signed in London, and there were 5 signatories to that agreement: United Kingdom, Federation of Malaya, North Borneo, and now known as Sabah, Sarawak, and Singapore. The bill to endorse Malaysian agreement was tabled in the House of Lords by Lord Lonsdale on 26th of July 1963 under the bill entitled Malaysia Bill. Perhaps it is appropriate if I may quote part of the speech when he tabled the bill. He said, Lord Cobalt, which revisited the countries, Sabah and Sarawak between February and April 1962, and which in the course of the most odious itinerary held 50 hearings at 35 centers, interviewed personally over 4,000 and some 690 groups, and carefully studied some 2,200 letters and memoranda from individuals and associations. Every shade of opinion, from hostile to the idea of Malaysia and to those who were convinced it was the right solution, came forward. The Commission reported unanimously in favor of Malaysia, and that Malaysia was supported by 2/3 of the people of Borneo, provided safeguards could be devised to meet their special conditions. In that same debate, Lord Lansdowne also said, a joint statement was made by the British and Malaysian government, in which it was agreed in principle to establish Malaysia by August 31st. And meanwhile, to set up an inter-government committee to work out detailed arrangement and safeguard for North Borneo and Sabah. The Malayan gesture of goodwill in agreeing that the Borneo state should have 40 out of 159 seats in the federal parliament, which was a decisive factor in convincing the Borneo leaders that there was here no question of takeover bid, but a genuine offer of real partnership. The bill was passed. The British and Malaysian government wanted to have Federation of Malaysia to be established on 31st August 1963. However, due to the opposition from the Indonesian and Philippines, the date was postponed. Indonesia and Philippines wanted to have a UN plebiscite to to ascertain if the formation of Malaysia was indeed supported by people of North Borneo and Sarawak. Thus, on 26 August and 2nd September 1963, a union group of 9 leaders, a UN mission, a group of 9 leaders, led by Lawrence Mission Mo, without the representative from Indonesia and Philippines who opposed to the mission, came to Sarawak and North Borneo to make their assessment. Protests by Chinese community in Sarawak, led by Sarawak United People's Party, in Sarawak were ignored by UN mission. The Sarawak election, which was held on the same year, June-July 1963, indicated, I said, 61% in favor of Malaysian government, in favor of Malaysia, 22% opposed, while 16.8% remained neutral and was used as a reaffirmation that people of Sarawak favored Malaysia. The same support of Malaysia was indicated to the UN mission by the people of Sabah. The result of the assessment from Sarawak and Sabah was announced by UN Secretary General then U Tan on the 14th of September 1963, stating that majority of peoples in Sarawak and Sabah favored Malaysia. Sarawak first chief minister was an Iban by the name of Stephen Kalong-Ningkan. He was sworn in on 22nd July 1963. On the very same day, 22nd July 1963, Sarawak declared its independence from Britain. This was followed by North Borneo, which declared its independence from Britain on 31st of August 1963. Singapore declared its independence, and this one I'm not too sure which is the correct one, on 30th May 1959. Based on historical timeline, Malaysia was formed as the result of 4 independent nations: Malaya, Singapore, Sarawak, and North Borneo, coming together on equal footing, merging as one. Both Sarawak and Sabah position within Malaysia were therefore over and above the status of the 11 federated Malay states contained within the Federation of Malaysia at that time. In short, while the four nations declared independence in different days, the day when the four nations gave birth to Malaysia, it was the 16th of September 1963. The question I'm asking is, which is the independent day of Malaysia? Is it 16th of September? Is it 31st of August? In spite of the historical timeline, the 16th of September is the birth of Malaysia. 31st August, for the next 47 years, was declared and observed as Hari Merdeka, that is 31st of August, for the whole of Malaysia. For some reason, September 16 was ignored for 47 years. After 47 long years being overshadowed by what should have been a regional celebration, at last, 16 September was accorded a rightful place, worthy of the whole nation's attention, celebration and commemoration. Ladies and gentlemen, the acknowledgement of 16th of September as the birth of Malaysia has come a long way. Although 16th September has always been perceived by older generation of Sarawak and Sabahan as a correct Malaysia Day of Independence, and has taken our nation a total of 5 Prime Ministers to right the wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, setting the record straight again, in accordance with history, it is not easy. It is easier said than done, especially after 47 years of past celebration and reassertion that it was correct, i.e. that the 31st of August is the day of independence for Malaysia. To make it even harder, our Prime Minister of Malaysia is also the President of UMNO, the founding party of the 11 federated states